It's time to restart with the clean slate. We're halfway through the 2025 Fantasy MLR season. It's time to reflect on what has happened, look at what's happening now, and try to predict what's to happen in the future. We have a whole bunch of new information 8 weeks in to this Fantasy MLR season. We look at some of the top performers, what we should have done, what we could have done, and what we might do moving forward. The Fantasy Rucker Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 149 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. With you each and every single week, Matt Yee. I am Ryan Yee. Utah is on bye, so that means Devin Vanderpool is on bye too. He's taking a little family trip, I hear, to the Great Wolf Lodge. So
one of the greatest places on earth.
I guess so. I've never been.
I've never been either, but I always looked at the cool rooms they had. They had like wolf dens. They got cool bunk beds, and I love a good bunk bed. Ryan, you know, back in the day we had cool bunk beds.
Oh yeah.
But
I guess Vandy and his family will be enjoying that. So it is Matt Yee and Ryan Yee holding down the fort here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show. We got a lot to get to.
Well, it's just nice that we get to be on the show, Ryan, on such a after a week of such great result.
Yeah, exciting stuff throughout the weekend. That was week 8 of Major League Rugby 2025. I said it at the top of the show, though, Maddie. I think it's time for a clean slate. It's time for a clean slate because we're halfway through. Can you believe it? We're halfway through the Fantasy MLR season. We've learned some things.
Yes.
Maybe we haven't learned some things yet.
I'm actually more confused on some things too.
No kidding. But maybe on this episode, we can take a step back, kind of look at what we were thinking heading into the season, maybe make some adjustments here, and maybe try to right the ship in terms of how we approach the second half of the Fantasy MLR season. So that's what this episode is all about, a clean slate. New week, new us. We're heading this into this second half in full swing. So let's reassess these teams. Let's see where they're at. Let's change our confidence level with some of these teams and players halfway through the season, like we mentioned. We'll break it all down. Again, we're going to get you all caught up with what happened over the course of the past 7 days. We've got a little bit of a league update for all of our Fantasy Ruckers League members. We'll, of course, have our quick tap recap to go over everything that went down in week 8 and its top performers, a waiver wire breakdown, a Rucking rundown of the games to come here in week 9, and of course talk a little bit about some money in our TFR Betting challenge brought to you by Betstamp. We started tracking Maddie's sportsbook lines. Some of the people in our community have been tracking it as well, and we'll have a look at how close you were, Maddie, and what that tells us about the money that we're placing down this week. I also got a little bit of a surprise segment with the theme of clean slate. We're going to take a little bit of a look of some of the top players here. And you love when we do this, Maddie, and head back to our drafting days that feel like forever ago and see, would we do the same thing here halfway through the season? A little bit of a clean slate recap, draft style here a little bit later on in the show. But Maddie, like you mentioned, exciting week and a lot of things to get to. Anything you need to say to the people before we hop right into this show?
Nope. Just keep on keeping on.
Keep on keeping on. We're right down to business. You've watched all the games. You've written down your notes in your nice little book there, Maddie. And we'll break it all down for the people. So let's get right into it. But like we say every single episode before we do, make sure you're giving us a follow at the Fantasy Ruckers. Handles up above. If you're watching on the YouTube video, down below in the description. If you're listening on the pod, Instagram, X, Facebook, YouTube, even Blue Sky. We're on Blue Sky now. That's the thing too. TikTok as well. We're on TikTok. So give us a follow there. Join our Discord channel. I got a fun little community that loves to talk game day reactions and everything else rugby that goes on in MLR and everything across the rugby world. And also check out the official platform of the Fantasy Ruckers when it comes to fantasy MLR, thefantasyruckers.com. It's got a whole bunch of fun stats on there, even if you're not partaking in MLR as of yet. Which we'll say we do wish everyone participates in
We
it, but if you aren't already, you can dabble a little bit. Check that out. Look at some stats. Maybe take part in our weekly challenge. And next season, maybe join a league in your own. Like, subscribe, hit that bell here on the YouTube video. We appreciate the support. Maddie, let's get right into it and catch the people up on what's happened around the league.
Let's do it.
News dump.
All right, it's time for our TFR news dump where we get everyone caught up with what has gone down over the course of the past week since our last episode. I think the biggest news, it happened right after we had released our episode and Utah teasing it. Big news. A return of a marquee player, Lance Williams. Utah player number 19 returns to Utah, the fourth most capped Warriors player ever. 790 tackles, is the leader of the Warriors. He stepped away for a year to join the USA Sevens program, but heading into week 9, he's back with the Utah Warriors, baby.
Yeah, and Lance Williams has always been a bit of a stalwart in our fantasy Ruckers leagues. It'll be interesting to see how he fits in. I mean, an electric offense, and a guy who brings explosiveness to both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. It'll be interesting to see how he fits in. So to me, that feels like Lahore is going to be moving a lot more in the second row. And Lance Williams is going to be kind of filling some of those spots in the back row. So looking forward to it. And I'm sure he's going to be a marquee guy to kind of pick up off the waiver wire, spend some cash.
Kind of their mainstay options, of course, Dylan Nell, who's been pretty decent fantasy wise. Frank Lahore, like you mentioned, Matt, he's been kind of flip flopping back and forth between back row and second row. Started off at the back row position this in week 7 before the bye. We'll see how he gets integrated. Again, Bailey Wilson, also a player that's kind of been in and out of the lineup as well at that flanker position. So again, we'll see where Lance Williams slots in, but I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be a marquee piece and a great addition for this Utah Warriors team halfway through the season, and he'll also be a nice addition for players here in heading into week 9 for the fantasy MLR season, which we'll talk a little bit more about here upcoming in our waiver wire breakdown. A couple other notes to add as well. An addition, Jay Tuivasa. We love when the league does this, or we love when teams do this, I should say, when there's no announcement. There's no roster update or anything like that.
You're supposed to just know, Ryan.
We just see a brand new name in the lineup. It happened last week or 2 weeks ago with Joe Reese with the addition of him in the front row for Old Glory DC. This week, we see Jay Tuivasa, who we thought was on San Diego, but is now on the NOLA Gold, and he made a bench appearance there this past week. Nonetheless, not too sure if that's really fantasy relevant, but just, I guess, a highlight of how fantasy managers and us here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show have to stay on our toes when it comes to players moving around and familiar names that we may see in different places.
Yeah. I don't know. We've been around the MLR long enough to know that this is just normal operating procedure.
Normal operating procedure, and one that we love so much here, right? We who cares about information? Who cares? That's why you come on the show, because we got it for you, right?
Exactly.
But it is true though. It does, like I said, keep us on our toes, and it kind of throws me back, Matt, to that message that was posted in our Discord channel about how this fantasy rugby thing, this fantasy MLR thing is hard. And it's little things like that that just add up when you're like, okay, just extra things that I got to pay attention to. You know, in football, fantasy hockey, fantasy basketball, you get a little notification. Hey, this guy has moved from this place, or this is a guy that you could pick up. Not the case here in the MLR. We find it out on lineup announcement match day, which I will say teams have been pretty good at announcing their lineup. Miami cutting it a little close this past weekend.
Oh, there you get a slap on the wrist here.
We'll cut them some slack. All right, last piece of news that I do want to talk about, Maddie, is the announcement from USA Rugby about the extended player squad that is going to be
They're
appearing
like
here in
72 people.
2025, a year that is with their World Cup qualification coming up. And yeah, you mentioned it, Maddie. There are a total of 72 names on this
My
list, a whole
goodness.
bunch of players to choose from for head coach Scott Lawrence to choose from. But I think what is reassuring to see is that there are obviously a whole bunch of MLR names, familiar MLR names on this list, a handful of them too, that are going to be making their first appearance with USA Rugby. Some notable names: Ezekiel Lindenmuth is on the squad. Rufus McLean are there as expected, and then also great to see people like Joe Johnson, Christian Poitevin, who's been having an electric 2025 MLR season, makes it to the list as well. Quoting Ray's Rugby, Brian Ray here on X, Riekert Hatting back from exile on onto the USA Rugby squad. So it's a couple familiar names there, along with a whole other bunch of other ones, like Maddie mentioned, 72 names in total here for the 2025 USA Rugby season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to see that it's clear that the MLR is being utilized as a pathway to develop local talent and also give foreign players a way for them to continue playing rugby and gain eligibility in the US. So we're seeing that with a lot of guys, Poitevin, Johnston, JP Smith. Yeah, all these guys that are kind of coming over, spending enough time here, getting residency, and getting eligibility through that.
Yeah, and this is exactly why the MLR was built, exactly why it was created. I guess, obviously, first and foremost,
Now,
to give people an outlet for fantasy rugby here in North America. Of course, that was the number one thought, at least for us here on the Fantasy Rucker Show. But in addition to giving the North American the North American rugby fan, it's satisfying that craving to have a professional league here, a nice little side piece. And again, a big emphasis is that development here stateside within North America as well. All right, that's all the news that I had, Maddie. Any of your sources reaching out to you with something that you have, or can we move on here to a little update that we have for our league members?
no time for sources, too busy winning.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
Hear ye, hear ye. Here is Supreme Commissioner Yi with a Fantasy Ruckers League update. Too busy winning, huh, Matt? That's
Well,
that's
not in the weekly challenge. We don't have to talk. Actually, we can talk about the weekly challenge because I'm still number one.
You are still number one.
What a
Seventh,
week.
a seventh finishing this
Yeah,
week.
it was a rough one.
A rough one. I'm going to mark my week up. I finished 12th here. But I just want to say we talked about the roster lineup announcements and the challenges that we have to face as fantasy MLR managers.
Hmm.
I'm chalking this one up. RFCLA is doing their best job of trying to shake me off as being one of their fans
Hmm.
because they announced Christian Dyer as a guy that's starting for them who doesn't end up being on the match day 23
Don't
or
want your
appearing on the match day
bandwagoning.
23.
Yeah, they don't need your bandwagoning, Ryan.
Will Leonard, yeah, I guess not. Or they're scared that they're gonna, with me being a fan. It happened to the Dallas Jackals, and it happened with some other teams before that they want to shake me off so that they could remain in this league.
Yeah, that is
Nonetheless,
true.
Christian Dyer doesn't appear on the match day 23, who I had in my weekly challenge lineup. Kind of
Tough.
got screwed a little bit there. Finished 12th. Devin Vandy Vanderpool finishing 8th, consistent there. So still some improvement to be made on our end. But the Fantasy Ruckers lineup, second on the week. I even
Not even
sat
set
there
by you.
thinking about, I was doing like a double negative where I'm like, okay, I said the whole thing a few episodes ago where I'm going to lineup I'm going to put for the Fantasy Ruckers, I'm going to switch it to put it in for my lineup and give the
Hmm.
Fantasy Ruckers my lineup. And then I did that. And then I'm like, okay, maybe I should double switch it because maybe there's a little
Hmm.
bit of jinxing going on. And I guess
Yep.
I made the wrong choice because the Fantasy
That's how it
Ruckers lineup
works
finished
usually.
second on the week. The first on the week, though, I think first of his year. Very own John Payne getting up there with his first of the week lineup. Very cool to see there. Congratulations, John. Big New England Free Jacks guy. I can imagine that drubbing of the New England Free Jacks over the Miami Sharks over the weekend helped him out a little bit on that, which we'll break down in just a sec. But congrats to John Payne for his weekly challenge win. And again, if you want to take part in our weekly challenge, you pick a five-man lineup, $15 budget. You fill out those five positions, you can get a little bit of a taste of what fantasy MLR has to offer. Love to see new names, love to see new teams, love to see new lineups in that roster that we see each and every week, and see if you can take down myself, Vandy, or Maddie, because right now it's looking like it's pretty easy to do that. But we'll
Whoa,
come
speak
back.
for yourself,
We'll
buddy.
come back even harder next week. Last little announcement there for the Fantasy Ruckers League members. Make sure, as always, as a housekeeping note, check that eligibility. There'll be
Sam
more guys
Gala.
that'll be switching back. Sam Gala is probably returning back or is returning back to that second row eligibility, which is very nice to have. Maddie, you and I have him on our Fantasy Ruckers team, which will be nice to
Mm-hmm.
slot him back nice and easily to that second row position. So make sure you go check that out. We'll make announcements accordingly on our Discord channel. Be on the lookout for that. All right, Maddie, let's hop right in. There's no time to waste. A lot of games to talk about.
Well,
Full slate. Let's get right into it.
yeah, I mean, you just skipped right over the fact that I
Quick
whooped your
tap
butt
recap.
in our listener league. But hey, we don't have to talk about that. We don't got to
No,
talk about
no,
that.
it's time for the quick time recap. No,
You're right. We don't got to talk about that.
Let's
I was
kind
down
of
by
lay the
30 and then came back.
let's lay the context for the people. I will say, going into the Sunday's match, New England Miami, I was feeling pretty good. Up by 15. It was what, Andrew Quattrin and LaRue Milan versus Jed Melvin and Vian Conradi. And we were even on the phone, Maddie, and you're like,
Hmm.
I don't know how this matchup is going to go. And I said, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good, but I guess we'll see. And I guess Jed and Vian decided to eavesdrop on that conversation and
They
said, you know
did.
what, Maddie, no, we got you. I'm gonna put up I think almost, I don't know if Vian, like up there with Vian Carrera, but two try performance by Jed Melvin, which we'll get into. But Maddie, I'll give it to you. Do you even want me to hit the round of applause thing? Is that
No,
is
no
that what a
round of
victory over
applause.
me?
Let's get into the recap. Let's go. I just wanted to, rub it in your face a little bit. So we're good. We're good. I got that squared out of the way. Um, and yeah,
Hey, but
now,
hey, big
well,
dub
hey,
for
Ryan, do you know what? In the listener league, there's a bunch of us all the way down to Vandy, by the way, 5-3. We're just killing it in that league. You know who isn't 5-3? That guy with the last name Fitzpatrick. Whoa,
yeah, Rugby
second
Mornings,
last. That
John
guy must be
Fitzpatrick.
struggling.
It would be very, very nice. It would be very nice. A 2025 wish, if you will. Four teams make playoffs in our listener league. If all three of us could make the playoffs, I think it's a big step up. We're
I think,
proving why it is a competition to get into that listener league to try to take us down. Fitzy not doing a great job of making or earning his stay in the listener league. A quick shout out though, the Fantasy Ruckers League, very competitive. 8 teams obviously in that one. Our team doing pretty good. Another big dub
well,
this week with a pretty solid team.
Fitzy's rugby morning
He did get it
is dominating this one, buddy. I'm pretty sure he got like the first tie in 3 years. So
70-70 for between him and community moderator Stephen Lone. What are the chances? It doesn't happen often, but of course it'll happen to Fitzy. And that undefeated record so far, I guess still technically undefeated, but still scarred now by that tie that sits there. Anyways, let's get right into it though. Let's talk about the points that led to that 70-70 tie. Let's talk about those points that got that big dub for Maddie. Let's talk about those points that got the big dub for the Fantasy Ruckers. Utah on bye, like we mentioned at the top of the show. Still 5 other matches to talk about here in week 8. And we start off on Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Old Glory DC taking on the Seattle Seawolves at home. A little bit of hope here. I think there's still questions surrounding Old Glory DC. A lot of Seawolves fans and people that have a lot of stock in Seawolves players in the fantasy MLR circles waiting to get this bounce back game from the Seattle Seawolves. It wasn't this one. It was not this one with a trouncing of a game, 29-12. Old Glory DC essentially dominated from start to finish. I know that the Seawolves went up early there, but from that point on, it was Old Glory DC all the way. I think this adds a little bit of reassurance to what we're seeing with Old Glory DC, who's starting to put together a pretty solid season, and a team that we were down on, Matt, you and I, starting to maybe get closer to proving us wrong there. But I think more importantly, the Seattle Seawolves, though,
yeah,
not looking good here in 2025. Might want to
I
hit that
think,
reset button.
yeah, for me, like this is more of a message of just how poor the Seattle Seawolves are. Like it was sloppy for both teams, but somehow Old Glory DC was able to continue to dominate. I think honestly the score should have been a lot higher for Old Glory DC. I think they had a lot of chances to score and they muffed it. And that's where I lead to the point of like It was really sloppy first half for both. It was a low scoring first half. Old Glory DC dominated. They couldn't get into the they couldn't get over the line. Um, and Seattle was just awful from start to finish. They just spent the entire game trying to exit out of their half.
Mm.
They had poor decision making, a lot of unforced errors, and really poor discipline. So, yeah, all the recipes right there is a recipe for failure, and Seattle did exactly that this game.
And we'll get into the fantasy MLR performers in just a sec here, which to no surprise is largely riddled at the top of the list with Old Glory DC players. But the question I have for you, Maddie, this is a team in the Seattle Seawolves that made the MLR Shield last year. There isn't many changes to this squad outside of the 10 position. Mac Mason, obviously not with the team anymore. Rodney Iona has been taking over that fly half role. We saw Eddie Fouché, the new incomer here, start at the center position. Is that really the impact of what Mac Mason brought to this team? Is it really all of that? What is happening to the Seawolves side that from top, literally from one of the most competitive teams in the Western Conference, now sits a bottom at a 2-5 record?
Yeah, I mean, like to me, it's just you think about how important that 10 position is to structure and to driving the offense forward. And I think they're missing it a lot. Like Iona's a great player. Fouché is a great player, but both of them really haven't been able to show exactly what this offense is capable of. You think about the guys like Dan Grill who haven't really been in the lineup that much.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just I don't know. I think it's just tough. It's tough to watch this team. It just seems like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But
It's
you see this a lot with great teams, right? Like great teams have great runs, but they don't turn into legendary and all-time teams because they become jaded with greatness, you know? They become jaded with sometimes the success, and it seems like they're just yeah, they're just not up for it right now.
they've been, well, I guess what's interesting is that they've been a mainstay, right, of this league for so long. To see them at the bottom of the Western Conference is just it's very, very weird. And I get it, right? Like there a lot of their matchups, the Western Conference is tough, right? They have taken on a San Diego Legion side that's electric. The Houston Sabercats electric. RFC Los Angeles in there as well. The Utah Warriors who look to be on the up and coming. It just it's very, very weird to see. Now, I will say to their point, like because there's so many teams that will be making playoffs this year, there's still time, right? Half a season left to go for them to turn things around, at least get their ticket into the door and see what they can do with that. But if I'm a Seawolves fan, still quite concerning here as you're starting to really, really fall behind some of those other teams in the Western Conference. Now,
Yeah.
from a fantasy perspective and more from the Old Glory DC side of things, I think there's a lot to take away from this. Again, maybe not the cleanest match. You still get away with the win. You sit second in the Eastern Conference now, just behind an electric Chicago Hounds team, tied with the New England Free Jacks at 4-3. And there were players that stepped up big. I think most notably here, especially from a fantasy perspective, 14.8 points. Nick Grigg, who now has back-to-back double-digit performances. 3 out of the 4 appearances that he's made for Old Glory DC this season have been double digits. His lone one being just outside that at 9.6. This is the first time that he's played the full 80. He added a try, 37 meters gain, along with 12 tackles. Great
Yeah.
performance by Nick Grigg. He looks really, really good and now has 3 tries in 4 games.
Yeah, when I saw Seattle starting Fouché against Nick Grigg, I just knew Nick Grigg was
The
set for a
fridge is
day.
coming, baby.
The fridge is coming for sure.
Yeah, Grigg taking advantage of that. Other guys, Colin Gross. This is really cool to see. I wish this performance had come
I
maybe 2 years ago when I predicted Gross to be in my top five. But he looked solid.
He looked incredible this game. Like he for me was the standout performer on this Old Glory DC side.
14.1 fantasy points, 17 tackles, a try assist, and a try added to the 20 meters gain that he had. Yeah, now double digit performances in the 2 matches that he's started in a row here in 7 and 8, in round 7 and 8. 10.8, and then 14.1. John Rizzo had a good matchup, obviously, with the try, helped him a bunch there, 11.4. And then Jason Robertson, again, I think we mentioned this guy like every single episode, it feels like, but just again, another consistent performance. 4 weeks in a row now that he's been double digits, 11.3 this time at his first start at the fullback position, still kicking for the squad, which helps bolster that as well. But 53 meters gained, a try assist, and then the two conversions that he made leads to a double digit performance. The only Seattle player with double digits for him is, or I should say, only at least the highest is 11.3 with Tony Pulu, large in part due to the try that he scored. And then throw Riekert Hatting in there as well,
Yeah.
10.2 for him there with the try that he added to round out the Seawolves performances.
Yeah. It was Ogora DC just really had a lot of opportunity to score points. And honestly, could have put up more fantasy points, but they did.
Yeah. Staying with that trend of just like left to be wanting when it comes to some fantasy point scoring there. Again, it's weird to see matches where your highest point totals are 14 fantasy points. Last year and the year before, we talked about it last episode. Check that out if you want to hear more about the trends of fantasy scoring being down. But again, another example of that. But a game that didn't necessarily have a shortage of points, at least from definitely one player, sticking with the messy trend. But Anthem Rugby Carolina host the NOLA Gold on Saturday at 7 p.m.
Game
Eastern time.
stunk.
I mean, it was just a crapshoot, huh?
This
Like
was brutal.
it was
This was an
just
awful game.
the momentum was swinging in Anthem Rugby Carolina's favor, right? They've been building and building and building and having solid performances, just becoming short. And it just feels like they took a massive step back in this one against a NOLA Gold side that I think you could have taken advantage of because they themselves have not been having that great of a season. But NOLA just like 33-19, but that's a lot closer than what this game felt like. And by all means, to your point, Maddie, it's not necessarily like it was any amazing performance by NOLA either, but they still come away with a dominant win, which kind of describes the type of game that this was.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like I kind of have it here. Like Carolina, actually, they're offensively, they looked better than NOLA. Like I thought they did a much better job in just building phases and holding structure than NOLA. I thought NOLA lacked any type of structure. And they're incredibly sloppy. So yeah, it's just difficult to watch this game when you're watching two teams just kind of not really do much at all. Positives though, actually, sorry, one more negative. Luke Carty came on, didn't do great for my kind of, hey, Luke Carty's good enough to get by because he played absolutely awful when he came on. But from a good side perspective or a positive note, JP Duplessis, absolute vintage performance from him, regardless of who it's against. He looked like the vintage JP Duplessis that was drafted in the first round consistently and started consistently of old. So it was great to see that. It honestly felt a little bit nostalgic for me.
Yeah. Because I know, Maddie, you had drafted him. You know that so well because you drafted him in the first round.
Drafted him for the past 2 years.
I think, yeah, the past
every
2
year
years
so far that I've done fantasy Ruckers.
And
yeah,
maybe this is an alluding to the waiver wire. Maybe if you can maybe bring back some of that vintageness there. But 73 meters gained, 15 tackles, a try assist, a try for 21.8 fantasy points on the week. Would have been one of our fantasy performance of the week, but some guy in the New England game decided to score 3 tries, which we'll get to. But that being said, though, great on JP Duplessis. By far his best performance. His highest before this was in round 1 with 8.3. And again, fantasy managers only 14% owned, but for fantasy managers that have been involved in fantasy MLR for some time, it was good to see JP Duplessis put these types of numbers back up. Other NOLA guys that did great, our second row team of the week member to add to that list with JP Duplessis as our center team of the week is William Wagaspak, second row player, 14.3 fantasy points, his highest of the season. Yeah, not a name that we typically see on this list, but hey, good for Wagaspak. 0% owned, but he says, hey, maybe I should be making a case for why you should pick me up. 16 tackles, 1 try assist, 30 meters gain in the full 80 played, along with 2 forced turnovers. William Wagaspak making a name for himself here and putting himself on the Fantasy Ruckers team of the week list at the second row position. Luke Campbell, 13.7. Talk about vintage. maybe this is the vintage Luke Campbell performance that we maybe have seen in the past. We haven't seen it
You
any
won't see it.
any close to this. 5.1 in the first round. He scores 13.7 this one, adds the try with the try assist, 39 meters gained. So obviously with that performance, despite maybe a little bit of sloppiness, NOLA still has a handful of Team of the Week honorees in this one. On the Anthem Rugby Carolina side, I'm going to talk about this guy a little bit later, but Toby Fricker continues to look good since his acquisition by Anthem Rugby Carolina into the lineup, puts his best performance up this season, 15.3 with 84 meters gained and a try. That little knock that he took when he did that double, like they reviewed it for a double movement, but him going for that line, I don't know if it was like a knee to the face, but he gets up with blood just dripping down his face.
Yeah.
Pretty iconic rugby moment there. And then outside of that, no other Anthem Rugby Carolina guys in the double digit performances. The closest is Colin Turner,
Yeah.
9.7 for
I
him.
I will say I do really like the way that McKean Ali Khan plays on this Carolina side. He only got 5.4 fantasy points this game. I think he was kind of dealing with a knock that he got during the game. But he's a sneaky consistent back rower for this side. I do like the way he plays, and he looked good when he was healthy.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. All right, let's move on to the third match of the weekend, 8 p.m. Eastern time
I
on
think the best game of the
Saturday.
weekend.
Houston Sabercats, RFC Los Angeles. You said the best game, Maddie?
I think so.
Yeah, it was electric. It was fun, entertaining finish. AJ Alatimu had the opportunity to tie up the match, slices it a little bit wide right. 24-22 victory for RFC Los Angeles. And what
Yeah.
is a statement game by them, by a
I
team that is rising and rising and rising. And that prediction that I had at the beginning of the year, where I said, this is the RFC Los Angeles team that I was thinking that was going to win the MLR Shield or have a shot at winning the MLR Shield. They've won now 4 matches in a row, which is electric.
Yeah, and this game is the best game they played this season. And I think this is kind of Ryan when we were talking about, how good this LA team looks on paper.
Mm-hmm.
When we talked about that, it was like this is what we are expecting. This is what we're looking for. And the one thing that I could think of is one, like this was a physical game. It was one that I kind of thought was going to be a little high scoring. And it ended up being a really physical game. But the one thing that I just couldn't shake is that LA just plays the style of game that you want to show to new fans.
Mm-hmm.
You want to show to people. It's when you think about really exciting, fast-paced rugby, you should think about LA. It's a game, type of game that you want to go see live. Like this is just the entertainment factor. And Ko has talked about when he's on the show, he wants to play in fun rugby, and that's what LARFC brings.
Yeah.
To me, like the perfect epitome of that was just, I think they ended up bringing the ball outside of their 22 from their own, I think, 10-meter line in, and they end up scoring a try like Will Leonard finishes off or something like that. Like it was ridiculous. And I love watching this team play. And you see that, like when you look at the fantasy wise, as we get into some of these fantasy numbers, like you look at how many guys on this LA side are over double digits. I'm counting what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that are just littered in double digits without a Houston guy to be seen outside of Tuala Tasi. So just speaks to the type of game that they play.
There's not many teams in MLR that can turn it on their head when it comes to starting from their own 10-meter line or something and or being within their own 22.
Well, I would say I would change it. I would change it, Ryan, that I don't think there's many teams that are brave enough or willing to do it. And
fair enough.
And LARFC just decides that, hey, regardless if there's a lot of wind in their face, whatever, a lot of teams could have kicked that away, and they decided that they're going to play. And you think about the excitement that you get when you see that in international test rugby. You see the excitement that you get when you're watching, especially Super Rugby. LARFC just plays a Southern Hemisphere type of rugby that we need more of.
It's those teams
in the MLR.
It's those teams that have the act of every time they score a try, there is a good chance that it's going to be a highlight reel type play. You know what I mean? Whether it's the Will Leonard try that you're talking about, or even Ko hitting that grubber and Gonzalo Bertranu coming out of nowhere and running down the line and outpacing there. It's incredible. Now, from the Houston side of things, Maddie, quickly, I don't think there's much to be left concerned about it for Houston. It was a hard fought battle, right?
It was, yeah. And
and you
LA
had an
played a good
opportunity
game.
to tie the match. Like it's two teams that I think one on the up and up with RFC Los Angeles. Houston has been very, very good, and has been getting better each and every week. This was just one of those matches where it was two good teams that were going head to head, and it was just RFC Los Angeles at the end edging them out.
Yep, 100%.
All right, let's talk about some of those performers that you were talking about, Matt. Yeah, littered with LA guys. Matthias Jensen, the highlight, I think, of this matchup at
He was
16.6 fantasy
everywhere.
points. We'll talk about him more in our waiver wire segment, but 66 meters gained, 20 tackles. Talk about being everywhere. That's a nice little indicator of that. His second double-digit performance of the weekend, his first since week one. Will Leonard, 14.6, with him adding the try there. Billy Meeks has been a very, very, very great addition to this season in terms of if you bet on him, if you banked on him heading into this year. Obviously, there was the disappointment last year with him with the Hounds, him at that fly half kind of experiment that happened, people getting worried because he wasn't in the lineup to start week one. But since then, like just like hovering around that 8 to 14 point range among the top fantasy scorers. And when you add a consistent level to that, just someone you're really happy to have on your roster. Billy Meeks does that again this week with that 14.5 performance. Reese McDonald, I mean, he's yet to start a match. He plays
Doesn't
his highest
matter.
number of minutes in this one, but decides, hey, I'm gonna run 111 meters gained on top of that. When this guy gets into the lineup, and it's going to be a tough call for LA because Roy Van Voot is great on his own too. I mean, this is the
You
skill that we're
can't.
talking about with this
Yeah.
RFCLA team, right? Like the fact that a guy like Reese McDonald is coming off your bench and you have two class guys that you can choose from in Roy Van Voot and Reese McDonald is just a testament to this team and the names that they have. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, just think about a Reese McDonald, Rory Van Voot, and Andrew Coe back three. Like it's that's tough. That's tough to look at a lineup and not think that that's going to be that's scary.
Yeah, very, very scary. No Semi Kunatani, and they're still doing this as well. We'll get into it at the waiver wire and we'll talk a little bit about more. But on the flip side, and on the benefactor, that Ben Houston again has another great week. He's now gone 5 straight weeks with double-digit fantasy point performances. Of course, he's owned across the board now. But if you were able to scoop Ben Houston up, you're very happy. On the Houston side of things, really the only notable or two notable guys, Tuala Talatasi Tasi. 13.5, plays his first full 80-minute game of the season, scores his second try of the year, adds 34 meters gained, 13.5 for him. Solid match for the former Arrows guy. Pita Aneasu, when he cashed in the try as well, he gets into the double-digit range coming off of the bench at 11 fantasy points there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was just looking at like you look at the explosiveness of LA. Five guys. Actually, one, two, three, four. Yeah, five guys over 50 meters gained.
Yeah.
Houston, one guy over 50 meters gained. Just speaks to how explosive this LA side is. And yeah, just how fun to watch they are.
Is RFCLA the team, despite maybe not being in first place, right, or having the best record, is that the team you want the most fantasy assets from right now, based on
It
the way
seems
that they
like
play?
it. It seems like it.
It does. Like, I
There's
guess
just a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys that you like that you'd like to have.
the two contrasting, I guess, teams here, and we're going to get into this team right now in this next match, is like, would you rather the RFC assets or Chicago Hounds? With even though they're first, like best, and on top of the most people's power rankings when it comes to MLR from a fantasy sense, I think I'm going RFCLA there. I think I'm
Yeah,
going
I agree.
RFCLA there, which is interesting. I will mention though, I didn't mention him. Team of the week honoree Declan Leaney, front row player of the week, 11.1 fantasy points, with the try that he scored. Always got to give the big boys a shout out. Declan Leaney, front row team of the week honoree. Houston Sabercats, the defensive set piece of the week with 4 fantasy points there. Moving on to that match we're talking about with the Chicago Hounds, San Diego Legion take on the Chicago Hounds at home. And what is, if the LA game and Houston game wasn't your match of the week, I thought this one was pretty fun to watch. Back and forth, hanging in there. Chicago comes through at the end there to win this one with a score of 27-20 with that last try. It was two solid teams going head to head once again, and again Chicago coming out on top here to win this one.
Yeah, I think just Chicago's one of those teams now where you can't make these little errors and still come away with the win. Like if you make little errors, they'll punish you and they'll punish you every time. And we saw this time and time again from San Diego. You see some kicking errors, you see some errors off of the restart, and you see some errors of just simply not finishing, like not finishing and getting the ball over the line. So, uh, to me, it was just a game of small errors made by San Diego that cost them really the win, but it was super well deserved by Chicago. They are showing themselves and provingly, it felt like I was almost watching this, Ryan. It almost felt like a championship type match.
Mm-hmm.
We were
Mm-hmm.
seeing the top team in the West, top team in the East, just being physical defensively, being physical offensively, and it was just hard fought. But Chicago came away with a well deserved win.
Yeah. So Chicago now sits 6-1. San Diego now gets handed their second loss from Chicago, sits 5-2. I guess San Diego pretty happy though that Houston also lost with the LA to keep them within striking distance there. But you're right. I think again a lot of good matches there. I mean, we have with those matches between Houston, LA, San Diego, and Chicago. I think that's arguably the four top teams I think people would put on their
Yep.
list that went head to head this past weekend. But from Chicago's standpoint of things, yeah, excellent. I mean, from a fantasy perspective, Lucas Rumble,
Don't see
Chicago,
him up here a lot.
Captain Canada. Yeah, we haven't seen him up here. The highest performance he had was in round two, 12.7, but 17.7 points in this one. Scores his first try of the year, 33 meters gained, but the big one that people are going to be talking about is 23 tackles, his season high so far.
It's classic.
Classic. He adds a forced turnover in there as well, breakdown steal, and Lucas Rumble is just zero point 0.1 shy away from making our team of the week honoree list. But really, really great to see Captain Canada up here with the Chicago side. Other guys, Christopher Hilsenbeck, who is on our team of the week, is the fly half team of the week honoree, 13.2 fantasy points. Tim Swiel continues to come off the bench.
Don't get it.
Hilsenbeck now has three straight games in double digits, has two conversion kicks, two penalty kicks. This was a perfect matchup when it comes to kind of fly half game because you could see that the kicking game was developing. Lincoln McClutchy in this one, we'll get into the San Diego side, had 10.5 points. It was his first full 80 game, and he had two conversion kicks, two penalty kicks as well. And this is exactly the fly half performance that you're looking for when it comes to that. Just a consistent game there, and Hilsenbeck taking advantage of that. Is it a matter of Maddie? Just if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They've been playing well with Hilsenbeck. Let's continue to ride it out
Yeah.
with him at 10.
Yeah, I don't see why they would change it. And even then, even when Swiel came on, Hilsenbeck stayed on. So yeah, it was like Carl Say was the guy who came off for Swiel. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard to sit this guy down. Like it's hard to sit him down. He's playing great rugby. He's playing great at that 10 position for Chicago. And it's great to see.
Yeah, not often that you're able to pick up a fly half mid-season who's going to have the numbers that Hilsenbeck does. But if you were able to scoop him up earlier this year, especially when Swiel got injured, you're definitely paying dividends now. San Diego side of things, Christian Poitevin, we talked about him making his first appearance with the USA Eagles. He continues to have an electric season.
Mhm.
17.5, his highest of the year, full 80 play, 22 tackles. Christian Poitevin. I mean,
Wow.
Matt, I think we have two different bites from this show that has you swooning over Christian Poitevin, and I think
Got great
that
hair.
he's putting up the numbers to back it up. Ryan James continues to have a great season. There was a lot of talk on who was going to be the back three player that emerges from the San Diego Legion offense since that first matchup that people were just head over heels for with two tries in that first round. 7 weeks later in round eight, he still puts up a 14.1 performance. His first triple digit meters gained match with 112 this year. Ryan James looks like he's the one to own in that San Diego back three room. But a guy that also is kind of emerging recently, Rian Stowers, 11.5. He's looking pretty good. And this week it was at the wing even, where he has 36 meters gained, a try, and eight tackles. He's a guy that still can be picked up, and he's looking pretty solid.
Still looks electric.
Still looks electric. All right, let's move on over now to our final matchup of the weekend. The New England
What
Free
they call
Jacks
a
taking on
hiding.
the Miami Sharks. I mean, there's not much to be said on this one. Just utter dominance by the New England Free Jacks at home on the lone Sunday matchup. They take this one 43-6. Don't even let Miami score a try. I mean, do you want to just get into the fantasy performers in this one? Because there's a whole bunch from the New England side that we need to get on here.
Well, what I will only say is that not from a fantasy side, but like Balatoy Penny is such an interesting mind
Hmm.
blow. It messes with my mind to watch him play. He runs like an absolute truck. He honestly, it's difficult to say this because Leuila is huge, but he's a bigger D'Angelo Leuila, with silky smooth hands and the shoulders the size of boulders. So, um, yeah, it's fun to watch him, and it's nice to know that they have that, even though Potros is out injured right now.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. Like, we know that Jason Potros is going to be out for a decent amount of time, it
Yeah.
sounds like. They obviously signed Dan Hollinshead, and that's, I guess, one that we
Number
didn't
one
talk
pick, Dan
about.
Holland said.
He kind of running joke on this show. Matt McCarthy of Rugby Wrap Up and his squad, fantasy squad, infamously picked Dan Hollinshead in the first round pick, which ended up being a pretty big swap. But it was funny to see his name back in the MLR. I'll admit it. I put Fab down to pick him up as a guy that is in need of a fly half, because I have Jason Potros, but Falatoy Penny, who is someone I swapped in quickly before that, I think is interesting there. But either way, fantasy performances. I mean, fantasy performer of the week, back three player of the week, Paula Balikana. It sounds like Balikana is a guy that's going to have one of these matches every
He has
single
one
year
every year. Yep.
where he just goes off.
And nobody
I
will have him either. Like
Yeah.
every year, less and less people will have him.
If I remember correctly, according to James Dealey of MLR Stats, this is the 45th player to score a hat trick in the MLR, the 50th hat trick to happen in MLR history. 108 meters gained, 27.5 fantasy points. Again, it's just hard to predict when this guy's going to do it. He's
Yeah.
widely available, but yeah, if you somehow had him, and I imagine that this is why John Payne was able to get in first place for this weekly challenge, was because he had Balikana on his roster. Jed Melvin, Matt, I'm not even going to say much. I'm going to let you talk about him because I know that he was a course of why you beat me in the listener league. 17.8 points for Jed Melvin. 27 meters gained, 2 tries, 7 tackles, and a try assist. He is our back row team of the
I
week player.
mean, we've seen this in the 6 games that he played last year in the regular season. Like he's due for multiple of these over a span of 6 games, and he does exactly that. Round 5, he gets two, after a suspension, he gets 2 tries, 34 meters gain, 8 tackles, 16.3 fantasy points. Round 8, does it back again. 2 tries, 27 meters gain, 1 try assist, 7 tackles, 17.8 fantasy points. Yeah, he is just consistently have a high ceiling, and yeah, he just finds a way sometimes to just get the ball through and get the ball over the line.
Yeah, I think confidence was maybe wavering a little bit with round 6 and 7 performance that were sub 6 points. But if you were even thinking about dropping Jed Melvin leading into this week, that has quickly
And
subsided with the
let me,
performance he had over the weekend.
yeah, and we're gonna move on to next guy, but like I see two kind of polar opposites in terms of fantasy performance, right? You look at Jed Melvin, high ceiling, high, like he could have a great breakout game. We saw him last year, put up 20, 30 points
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
So extremely high ceiling. And then you look at a guy like Vian Conradi, who's coming back, seems like he's coming back into form, but he's got that, like, I think we always talk about him ever since we've started doing this, is like Vian Conradi's the guy with the low floor, or sorry, the high floor. He's the guy who's consistent. He's the guy who will get you the double-digit points. He may not score every game, but he will produce. And we see this coming on like this week, 16.8 fantasy points.
I mean, 101 meters gained.
Yeah,
Like
101 meters gained. Doesn't even need to try 14 tackles. Yeah, in the last 4 weeks, he hasn't had lower than 10 fantasy points in every week. And I wouldn't even say that necessarily he's been amazing every week, but it's great to see kind of vintage Vian Conradi coming back into form, and fantasy owners and fantasy managers are reaping the benefits here.
Yeah, absolutely. Falatoy Penny, Maddie, you mentioned him, 15.8 fantasy points at the fly half, starting, I mean, large part due to getting 5 conversion kicks and a penalty kick in a 43-point match. So he obviously reaped the rewards of that. On the Miami side of things, you got Manuel Ardeo, who just like kind of sneakily
Oh, he put up his classic forced turnover performance and 16 tackles. So
right. He's just, even though your team is only scoring 6 points, no tries whatsoever, you're still going to find a way to
that's
get
what you get for Ardeo.
That's what you get from Ardeo. And then Benjamin Bonasso actually had a very, very solid game, at least from the defensive standpoint, 19 tackles to get 13.7 fantasy points.
Right. I forgot the last piece of news. I did actually have sources with news. Wasn't sources. It was just a post. Josiah Mora, I think we forgot, but a nice little storyline here. Josiah Mora recently on the New England Free Jacks gets loaned to the Miami Sharks. I think just last week, and then he has to be on the Miami Sharks side to watch his former team give his new team an absolute hiding. So, yeah, another storyline added to that. But yeah, I mean, Miami, I don't know what to say about this team. It's tough. It's tough sledding for them.
How much of this game, before we move on to this last little bit, how much of this game is instilling confidence in New England for you, or is it more of just Miami's just not a
Miami's
great
just
team?
bad. Miami's just bad. Like, I don't know if I can take any games against NOLA, any games against Miami, like really with too much weight.
Yeah.
You know?
It's tough. It's tough. All right. Well, hey, full slate of matches again. A lot of fantasy performers there. Where we're going to wrap up this quick tap recap segment, though, is like I mentioned earlier in the show, an exclusive, additional segment that we'll have here. We're halfway through the season. Let's do a little bit of revisionist history and do our clean slate. Let's wipe the slate clean with what we're talking about. And let's go back and look at some of the top 5 performers of this season so far and look back at who you're drafting first overall. The consensus this past season has been Jason Putros and Semi Kunatani going into the year. That's obviously not the case. 8 weeks after this thing, we look at our top 5 players. Davy Kutzer sits up top, 99.3 fantasy points. Ryan James is number 2, 93.2. Devon Rousseau, 89.2. In third place, Jason Robertson, 83.3. And then Christian Poitevin sitting there at just 83 fantasy points as well. When you look at this list,
Poitevin has sneakily made himself up there. That's crazy.
When you
every
look
time
at this,
he starts, he gets double-digit points. Sorry,
it's true. It's true. Again, 83.9 for Jason Robertson, 83.3 for Christian Poitevin. The sixth and outside looking in, Jonah Moe, 81.8. Ben Houston, 80.9. And a guy we just talked about, Manuel Ardeo, is 79.2. You look at some of these names, and maybe it's not in the top 5 list. Maybe it's a guy in that upper echelon. Maddie, you now know you've been halfway through this season. Semi Kunitani is definitely not it. We talked about the fantasy Ruckers curse. Jason Putros, large in part due to injury, still can't control it. Probably not that top pick. If you could go back and tell fantasy managers who that consensus first overall pick should be, now that you've seen the season so far, who are you picking?
It's the butterfly effect, Ryan. It's the butterfly effect. Because you go back and I pick Davy Kutzer. What happens to Davy Kutzer? He ends up at the bottom.
We'll say this is the unofficial. One, so we're not putting any new curses. I don't think it counts halfway through the year, so no TFR curses here.
Look, to me, it's easy decision. Like David Kutzer has been so high, so much higher above the rest. Like you just look at some of his performances. Put away last week because just this past weekend because he got hurt really early and AJ Alatimu came in, but like. His lowest points has been 10 points.
Yeah.
His highest points have been 25.3. His points basically average out to like a 15 points per game.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. Like if you think about the guys or the position that's been the most almost, I would say, scarce in terms of points and actually the scarce in terms of consistency, I would say it's the 10 position. Like you look across every team you look across, even some of the most consistent teams in terms of New England Free Jacks, where you expect consistency at the 10 position. You even look at LARC with Christian Lealifano. There has been no one as consistent as Davy Kutzer has been. And that's hard to put anybody else in that number 1 spot.
Yeah. Unfortunate with the injury, but maybe that's just a testament to his performance as well. Like, he only plays 10 minutes this past week and still is 6 points above the next guy there at the top of the list. It's the same thing for me. A healthy Davy Kutzer has been electric this 2025 season. All right. Well, hey, a little bit of revisionist history. Again, clean slate. It's interesting to look back on that. I guess we mentioned his name, but I'll just quickly say it. And we'll get into these guys that you may pick up for this guy. Semi Kunatani drop.
I don't know. I'm going to wait till you play the waiver wire music and then I'll answer.
All right. Let's do it.
Waiver wire breakdown.
All right, let's get into that
There's
question
concerns, Ryan.
with the
There's
waiver wire
concerns.
breakdown. There's
Like
concerns?
I don't think you can keep him anymore. There's no
No.
way that you can continue to have him and just have him suck up a spot on your bench. Like there are back rowers that are going to, as it seems this season, be able to put a lot more output than he is. Even if you have to drop and switch guys, like you can get more output out of guys that are in the waiver wire. And just it's too long. We're at round 8 now. You can't expect it. Yes, he might end up in a lineup. Yes, somebody might pick him up, but like there's no more. You missed 8 rounds of points and you've lost your first round pick
What
and you
else?
just had to deal with it.
What I'll say is if you're sitting atop of your league standings, which again, it's like the chicken before the egg because or the egg before the chicken. Like you're probably not in the top of your standings if you drafted Semi Kunitani first overall because you lost out on a first round pick. Now, there are maybe some circumstances where maybe you got saved with the later steal, maybe like a Christian Poitevin or something like that. So if you're in that situation, hey, maybe it doesn't hurt to hold on to Semi Kunitani. But if you're stretching, you're in that 5th spot of your league to try to get into playoffs, like you got to make some moves now where you're going to get guys that are going to produce for you now. Maybe you wait, and maybe he's not a waiver wire drop, which some of the guys we're going to talk about here. But if he's not in the lineup again this week, or if he's coming
Even
off
if
the,
he is, even
if
if he's coming off the bench, like it just doesn't seem like he's fit enough to play. Like
yeah,
watching the last couple games when he was in there, he just doesn't look like he's fit enough to give you that fantasy impact and have that explosive output that we're used to seeing.
yeah. So let's talk about some guys though that are available that you may want to pick up using that extra roster space. Start off at the front row position. I got Connor Robinson in this one here, Maddie. Anthem Rugby Carolina goes up against the Chicago Hounds. I know a tough situation there, but Connor Robinson has been pretty all
Yeah.
right. 27.8 fantasy points, starts at the hooker position, only 14% owned. I think this could be
Here's
a streaming option that you could have.
Yeah, here's my concern. Like Chicago Hounds, very good structurally and knows how to keep possession with the ball. That's one thing. Two, ever since Alex Mon has been back in the lineup, Alex Mon, even though he's not playing in the hooker spot necessarily,
Yeah.
I think 2 games ago that happened. He's the guy throwing it and he's the guy at the back of the mall. So
Mm.
Connor Robinson reaped a lot of rewards at the back of the mall. Um, so I'm just not too sure. And honestly, Anthem's set piece hasn't looked as good the past couple weeks. And Chicago Hounds is a very good set piece.
Yeah, and again, I will preface it by saying that the front row options are slim pickings because they're getting scooped
Mhm.
up. Like there were
Yeah.
options like before. But Maddie,
Even
here's one guy that you might be looking at.
I mean, even with mine, like I got Ali Lepetti. He comes off the bench this week. Ends up scoring a try. He's been consistently good. He's 43% owned, has 41 point 0.3 fantasy points on the season. He's been getting over 5 fantasy points in the last 4 weeks. To me, like it's tough and I know Joe Taufetti shouted us out on his Instagram, so it hurts me to say this, but like it's tough to see them not start Ale Lepetti moving forward. The only downside that I look at this and why I might think about, maybe you got to look at an option like Pita Aneasu, who I think might gain that starting role back, is just because he's on a NOLA team and this NOLA team does not look good, but somehow he finds a way to score points. And yeah, so
That
Ale
NOLA team
Lepetti,
does
yeah.
that NOLA team does rely on that set piece play though. They are the
Yep.
top scoring set piece right now. So despite being kind of hesitant in terms of having NOLA assets,
Yep.
a piece of that set piece might not be a bad thing. All right,
Agreed.
second row position here. I'm going with Rob Harley. 22.4 fantasy points on the season so far, only 29% owned. But Rob Harley is a guy, again, second row position is hard to come by. And it's going to be effective. And Rob Harley for the past 4 weeks has been very, very, very
Yeah.
dependable.
Outside of the card on the weekend, he was good.
Yeah. He would have had around what he's been averaging, around 5 to 7 fantasy points, playing the full 80. He gets you at least 10 tackles every single game. I think Rob Harley is a guy that you can slot into your lineup quite well, and they're taking on the NOLA Gold there. So take that for what you will here for this upcoming week.
Yeah, to me for the second row, it's like look at the tackle count because second rowers, you don't need to be reliant on the offense. You just build up tackles. And a guy who's similarly consistent, I guess, and a guy who's kind of gone under the radar, unfortunately, is on a pretty poop team. Thomas Caceres, second row for Miami Sharks, 28.5 fantasy points on the season. The past, I'd say, scoring over 5 points in 3 out of the 4 past weeks that he's played. Gets 7.1 fantasy points on just the past one. So yeah, he's an interesting kind of start again, like similar to the front row. Second row is slim pickings here. There's a very key group of top guys. And then after that, you're really just looking for guys who are going to not get 1 to 3 points and guys who can put up a 5 point game, a 6 point game. And you're just hoping for that.
And it is Seattle on bye this week. So maybe not
Yes.
from the front row position, but if you have a Rhino Herps, these are two options that you can slot in there that can
Yeah.
fill in those points for you. All right, back row position. If you have a Riekert Hatting or any of the back row options from Seattle, here's
Nobody's
some of
got
the guys to
Rickard
look in
at it.
for. This is long term, and I don't think we need to key in on too long on this guy because we've already said his name so much this episode. But Jed Melvin, I
Kind of
don't
silly. I don't
understand.
understand.
I don't understand either. I don't get how this guy is 43% owned. You can pick him up. More than half of leagues can pick this guy up. 60.1 fantasy points on the season. I get it. He's had back-to-back weeks before this breakout game. I won't even call it a breakout game, but this explosive performance where he only got you 4 or 5 fantasy points. But Jed Melvin, that's what you were saying there earlier, Matt, is that he has the ability to do this, and not many back row players can from a fantasy sense. So I think the key option, if you're the Semi Kunitani owner, I am making this pick swap every day of the week. Drop Semi
Yep.
Kunitani, pick up Jed Melvin. I'm definitely okay with that. But the guy that I will talk about here for other options that are less owned than Jed Melvin, I mentioned him last week. Aiden King, 43.7 fantasy points on the season, 29% owned. So some people listen to me. He was 0% owned last week.
Oh,
A couple leagues heard me. He
hey, you
did
got
get a
some people
yellow
a
card.
card. Yeah.
He did get a card this week that kind of dampened the performance, but his involvement on the field is great. And it makes you confident in the output that he is going to get you, barring that he doesn't get a card. So I think he's young. The potential is there. He's getting better each and every week. I think Aiden King is a solid option here heading into week 9.
Yeah, and talk about another young guy, a guy who's had back-to-back great performances for Gore DC. Not exactly sure where Jamma Fanana Banana Schultz is. But Colin Gross is fitting in and I think to me, he's outplayed Jamma Fanana Schultz. And he's a guy who's very similar to the likes of Corey Daniel in the sense that he doesn't need incredibly explosive offensive performances because he can get it on the defensive side of the ball, racking up 20 tackles last week, 17 tackles in this just past round. But he'll give you that offensive explosiveness. It's just a matter of, you don't need to rely on it. So 10.8 points last week, 14.1 in the past round. Yeah, I really have a high outlook for every time he kind of gets on the field and every time he gets a starting role. He's going to perform.
All right, let's move on to the scrum half position. Matt, I'll let you go first here. I think
I
this
don't
just might be the
know.
strategy
I don't
going
even
forward.
know. Yeah, like I put Jason Higgins just because Chicago is playing Anthem, and I think he's kind of definitely deserves some playing time this year. And I think he deserves a start. I don't think Mitch Short has necessarily been amazing, and I think he could probably use some rest. I just have this feeling that he might be starting, and Jason Higgins, I mean, he's due for a hat trick every year. I
That is
swear he's due
true.
for a hat trick, and it could be this week. So if you have a JP Smith right now, or if you have a 9 that you're not really comfortable with, potentially get ahead of it. Pick up Jason Higgins and have him before the lineups come out, and so you're not scrambling on Friday.
That leads to my question is again, I'm sitting here as I was going through my waiver wire suggestions this week, and the 9 is a barren wasteland, and that's why you go to strategies like
It's
yourself, Maddie.
just yeah, but
The
like you
question
you
is,
you've lost. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, the question for me is just like there's so many of these tandem combos in the league.
It's yeah.
Is
It's
there
not even
one
like
that you would want if you had to pick a combo? Is there one that you would want? And is it even worth it to have that, or is it really just kind of making do with what you have?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's worth it. Like they cannibalize each other, right?
Yeah.
Like one guy goes off and the other guy comes on, and with 40 minutes left, and suddenly you got a nine that's playing 60 minutes. Like this isn't what we get from, like, you think about the Gonzalo Bertranos who's playing basically 70 minutes every match, the Richard Judds playing 65 to 70 minutes every match, Andre Warner who's doing the same, Thomas Kubeli is doing the same. Like you're thinking about that, like these are guys that are scoring points because they're on the field, and you look it down the line and you're like, Luke Campbell, yeah, he's basically mandated to split time with Ruben DeHaas because of
Mhm.
Scott Lawrence saying, hey, he needs to play with Luke Hardy down there. You think about, like, I'm trying to think who else, like uh Ethan McVeigh and Connor Buckley, like they split time pretty well. It's just, yeah, I don't
It's
know.
tough.
I personally, I would
Tough.
stay away from these, like these combos. I'd especially stay away from NOLA. It feels like they are genuinely, I know Luke Campbell had a week, but they are genuinely mandating the fact that Ruben DeHaas needs to play at least 45 or 40, like 30 minutes a game. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just stay away from that.
If you
And they
have
suck.
to, I put a gun to your head, you need to start a nine. What are you picking out of the kind of second tier options that you kind of listed? Like the team's nine, I guess, if you had to pick.
I guess Zion going doesn't really count as a second tier nine, does he?
I mean, you could. I think what is that? Like, would you want that? I guess he's 71% owned, but like, I do think there's a little bit of that. But like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's played too much to be like that second tier nine. Like
yeah,
for me,
like I
honestly,
guess,
it's like a Carl Keane.
yeah,
Like to me, like a Carl Keane actually might be a guy that I look at and you're like, he's he's a guy that I would start. Are you expecting a lot? No, but
but are you
is he
expecting a lot
gonna
from the
have,
nine position period? I guess, you know,
yeah, but he's gonna have a lot more upside than some of these other guys who are playing 50 minutes and
yeah,
45 minutes.
yeah.
So
Yeah, there was a reason why Carl Keane, he didn't start this past week, obviously, with
yeah.
Carlo Denishan being in there, but that's there's a reason why he was my waiver pickup for the past 2 or 3 weeks in a row. All right, fly half position. Matt, you and I are on the same page. Kutzer leaving in 10 minutes into the match. You got to pick up AJ Alatimu.
Yeah.
22.4 fantasy points, 43% owned, especially if you're the Kutzer owner and you need a kicker. It's looking like when you leave 10 minutes into a match, it's not great. Um, you go up against a weak Miami Sharks team, the stars are kind of aligning here that our team is going to get the start at 10.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like Alatimu is not going to give you 10, 15, like 15,
No,
20 points
no.
like Kutzer is, but if you need a 10 and you think a guy's going to start and you got Kutzer and Hilsenbeck isn't available and the options are grim in the 10 position as well, AJ Alatimu might be a guy that you just want to pick up and stash on the bench just in case.
All right, center position, Tau Talatasi. Tassi is my pick here. 0% owned, 36.5 fantasy points. I think he's starting to get into form after dealing with a little bit of injury. I think he's going to be a great streaming option this week if he starts against the Miami Sharks. And you can see what he does. If he has another boom performance, you have a center that may have long-term appeal for you. I love Tossi's upside here, especially this week. If you have a Creel, if you have a Rousseau and you've been reaping the rewards of him having center eligibility, I think Tassi might be a nice option to kind of slot in there at your center position.
Yeah, and for me, like it was tough watching the LARC game and not, like, you got to see these guys go head to head, but it was tough to watch Matthias Jensen play and just be like, yeah, this guy isn't good enough to be rostered in most leagues or most teams. Or no, most leagues. He's got 43.3 fantasy points. He obviously hasn't started. Nick Chan is out injured, so you don't have to be
Hmm.
worried about that competition.
Hmm.
But yeah, has an absolute game over the past week, which we talked about, 66 meters gained, 20 tackles. But this isn't his first week in the double digits. It's like the first week that we saw him play as well. We saw the same thing: 11.5 fantasy points, 97 meters gained, 6 tackles. And I think as this offense for LA continues to get better, we're going to see him continue to get better as well.
All right, back three position. I'll throw this question out for you, Maddie, because you've been on the record on this show of saying just you don't know when this guy's going to start, but he's a pretty solid player. With the Kutzer injury, is there any appeal to picking up Drew Wild? 38.3 fantasy points, 43% owned.
I
He's been starting at the fullback position.
He was my borderline gonna be my waiver wire pickup, but I just, yeah, I just couldn't didn't see him as like a long-term option, so I wanted to put Rufus McLean instead, a
Mhm.
guy who I consistently like. He's a guy who puts up over 7 fantasy points. You want some consistency. You want a guy who might get you some upside. Rufus McLean, I think, is one that you could pick up. But yeah, Drew Wild is definitely another viable option when it comes to the back three position.
My pickup for the back three position, Toby Fricker, 0% owned, 20.8 fantasy points. I get it. He's on Anthem Rugby Carolina, and maybe that's not so appealing, especially going up against Chicago this week. But Toby Fricker has been on the up and up, and from the eye test, he's looked very good, and he's scored points, and he gets into opportunities because Anthem, like you mentioned, Matthew, at times their offense does look solid. I guess people are going to be a little bit turned off with the performance against NOLA, but Toby Fricker was one of the bright spots there, and I think he would be a great streaming option if you have a Tony Pulu, and any of those guys that are in that Seattle
Inafuti,
back
yep.
three, Ian Afudi,
Jade
Jade
Stigling.
Stigling. Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be a nice streaming option there to see what he can possibly do this week. You sent me a text, Maddie, in the waiver wire suggestions here. For the defensive set piece, you just texted me, don't do it. Explain.
Don't need it. Literally, I have not played with a defensive set piece for the past 4 weeks. And I've actually done better than I have before. So, in my opinion, they just don't put up enough points to justify spending fab, to justify dropping a player for it. Yeah, I just think I'd much rather hold an extra back rower. I'd much rather hold an extra center or back three, or second rower or forward just in case. And that's ultimately going to help me out more than 1 point a week or 2 points a week from the set piece.
It's true. It's true. The way that the rules are set up right now, I think the meta is leaning towards that way where you don't need the defensive set piece, and the advantages of having an extra
Yeah.
bench spot do outweigh
And
those pros.
and I'd say if the team that you have, like if you have Seattle, and I know 100% own Seattle, somebody has Seattle. Um, So if you have Seattle, like don't stress about needing to keep Seattle and drop another player for another. Like you can win without defensive set pieces.
Yeah, yeah.
I would just keep them either in your lineup or on your bench.
Now it does make those losses if you do lose by one fantasy point probably
Yeah,
pretty tough knowing that. So there is still advantages. The way
get
I
better
look at
players.
it, if you are a team that's winning, if you're in your league and you are winning your league and you have a set piece, like just stick with that set piece. It's been successful for you. You don't need to drop it. It doesn't seem like you need the bench spots. Just ride with it. If you're a team that's in the bottom of the dumps and you got to take flyers on some of these guys that we talked about, like if you need a Jed Melvin, like I would do that every day of the week. Drop your set piece, pick up Jed Melvin, go for that. If
Yeah.
you need the AJ Alatimu and you have Davy Kutzer and you need to have that spot, like that
Yeah.
is advantage to
Yeah,
have
it's
that.
that's a
So
great point. They are great positions to drop for guys in the waiver wire
yeah,
when you
yeah,
don't know who else to drop.
exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, hey, those are our waiver wire pickups. I'll say quickly, if you do have the space for a defensive set piece, a good streaming option, the Utah Warriors. They're looking pretty solid. They probably
Yep.
dropped through the bye week and they take up on RFCLA. Seems to be a big point scoring battles when RFCLA goes up again. Two high powered offenses. Utah has Liam Coltman. Should be a solid game. But speaking of that, let's start talking about and previewing and give our predictions for the upcoming week 9.
Rucking Rundown.
All right, time for our Rucking Rundown to preview what is to come here in MLR 2025's Week 9 on bye. Like we mentioned, the Seattle Seawolves. Maddie, you're hanging in there. 500, 19 and 19 on the season. Vandy still running away with things, 24 and 14 for him. So we'll see what picks he has coming up this week. And I am sitting in second place at 21 and 17. So we'll see who is able to make a swing here in this week. We got a whole bunch of interesting matchups, and it starts off all on Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern time. The New England Free Jacks taking on the San Diego Legion at home. Which New England team are we going to see? Is it going to be the one electric one that we saw against Miami, or is it going to be one of the tougher matches that we saw earlier in the season where they have been prone to making mistakes and giving up games? The San Diego Legion coming off of a tough loss to the Chicago Hounds. They'll be looking for a little bit of redemption. What are we thinking here, Maddie?
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough for me not to go with San Diego Legion here. I think it'll be No, I don't know. I honestly think San Diego is going to dominate this one. I will say San Diego the past couple weeks been making some clinical errors, um, and hasn't looked as crisp. But I can see them coming back into form here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's hard to bet against really any of these top Western Conference teams right now,
Yeah.
especially when they take on an Eastern team. I get it. The Chicago Hounds, the upper echelon of that Eastern team, kind of got the best hand this past week, but I think the space between
Also,
Chicago and the rest of the Eastern Conference is a little bit larger than what people may seem. I'm picking San Diego in this one as well, and I'm pretty happy with playing my San Diego assets. I know you're going to play the Vian Conradis, the Jed Melvins, and things like that. Is there any New England Free Jacks guys that you're kind of hesitant to play in this one? Like, would you?
eh,
Here's a good option. Would you? I have it, and I know I've done this before, where I'm asking advice for myself. But would you rather play Shiloh Klein if he starts, or Andrew Quattrin?
Quattrin.
Quattrin. Okay. Shiloh Klein's a
Quattrin's my
good call.
guy.
Okay. All right. Any other guys on the New England side that you're maybe staying away from?
No, I was just gonna say that Jed Melvin, Vian Conradi versus Brad Wilkin, Christian
Luru
Puelu.
Milan, see you starting.
Uh, yeah, I could see him being okay.
Wayne Vanderbank. He caught up, went off early, but
Yeah, I could also see him being okay. Like San Diego centers don't really impress me. That's the thing. But
okay.
defensively, they do look good. But yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be a good matchup.
All right. Next matchup, 7 p.m. Eastern time. The NOLA Gold at home taking on Old Glory DC. Um,
Oh, Lord, DC.
yeah, I was just gonna say DC for me on this one as well. I'm still not impressed with the NOLA
I don't.
Gold here.
Yeah, I would just temper your expectations. Like the NOLA guys are not going to play the same way they did last week. I mean, sorry, they still suck last week, in the past round, but like they're not going to put up the same amount of points that they did against the Old Glory DC side. At least that's my prediction. So yeah, don't look at like a Japley Duplessis and think, hey, this guy's going to go off again. He could prove, make me eat my words. I hope he does because I love the guy. But yeah, I just don't see it.
Is this going to be another week where we are the same page all the way through? We're both on the same page. San Diego, both on page DC.
Uh,
We'll see here going down the list. Quick question: JP Duplessis or Nick Rigg?
Nick Berg.
Okay. Miami Sharks taking on the Houston Sabercats. This is a weird one. 7:30. So there's going to be a little bit of an overlap here
Oh, good.
between these two matches. But it is one that maybe you don't need to tune into because it is the Miami Sharks taking on the Houston Sabercats. I need we don't need to play all your
Yeah.
Houston players. Play
Yeah,
all of
Houston's
them.
gonna do well.
Houston's going to win this one, I think, in a landslide. I assume you figure the same, Maddie.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, not much else to say.
RFC Los Angeles taking on the Utah Warriors to round out the Saturday's matches at 10 p.m. Eastern time. This one, I think, is my spiciest matchup of the week. Like this one is going to be
I think it's the
interesting.
most, yeah, it's the most interesting offense. You think about two offenses that are the most explosive and fun to watch and exciting. You think of these two teams. The one thing I'll say is like Utah defensively, just I think they're going to struggle. Like I think they're going to struggle against this LA side. Does that mean they're going to put up enough points to keep up? I don't know, but LA's on a roll. It's hard to go against them right now. I got to go LA.
Yeah, I'm going LA in this one. So, which basically all but seals the nail in the coffin for how we are
Well,
looking at this. Matthew, don't.
no.
Chicago
Yes.
Hounds taking on Anthem Rugby Carolina on the lone Sunday matchup at 2 p.m. Eastern
Uh,
time. Chicago.
Chicago. I'd be really interested who starts at the hooker position. If Fawcett is starting, he is going to be an electric start. I think Chicago Hounds are, yeah, just dominant. So it'll be interesting. I'll be really interested to see what lineup Chicago puts out there.
Who are you starting on the Anthem side of things?
Uh, I mean, hard to not start Gaffa.
If he's in the lineup,
If
I'm
he's
I'm
in the
assuming
lineup,
I'm assuming he's was out last week with the banged up injury that he took in the week before. We'll
yeah.
see if he comes in this one.
Sam Gala is hard to not start now that he's second row eligible. Makeen Ali Khan, really hard not to start. Um, yeah, I mean that's really about it, honestly. Like Toby
It's
Fricker,
tough,
maybe, but it's you're up against
risky, risky
a
play.
really good defensive Chicago side that also is very good at possessing the ball. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough this week.
All right.
I
Well,
think to
that's
me, you're looking at guys that are going to make a lot of tackles.
yeah, same page for Maddie and myself. We'll get Vandy's picks in and we'll see if he strays away from the status quo. but no movement going to be happening between Maddie and myself, at least for this week. But I
Yeah.
think I'm pretty confident in these picks. All right, let's talk about how confident when it comes to putting our money where our mouth is.
TFR Betting Challenge.
We round out this episode 149 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show with the TFR Betting Challenge presented by Betstamp. Betstamp betting made easy. Get in on the MLR betting action and sports books available in your area. Got a link down below to give you some first time new user deals, some free bets that you can cash in on. And it's a nice little website that curates all of the available sports books that are available in your localized region. We've gotten a lot of support from there, and we appreciate Betstamp for sponsoring this segment. And we continue here with a week that was pretty tough for the boys.
Yeah.
We got bamboozled. We got
Well, we
bamboozled.
believed.
We
We
believed.
believed.
We
We
saw the
believed that we could win.
We believed the Seattle Seawolves line. We saw it was too good to be true, but the sports books have something in there and said,
Hey,
"Hey,
that's what
no,
they do.
that's what
That's
they
what they
do."
do. They know what we're thinking. They heard my line and they said, just wait till he sees ours.
Same with Anthem Rugby Carolina. They had hit and covered the spread 4 weeks in a row. They end that streak this past week after getting blown out by the NOLA Gold.
I
Your
think I
lines
told
were
you guys. I think I told you guys that, hey, 7.5, too close for me.
You did say that. So Vandy losing $17 on the week. I lost 14. Vandy's down to $79 on the season. I'm at 29 in the positive.
Whoopity.
So we'll see whether or not we can turn things around this upcoming week. Talking about those lines though, Maddie.
Yeah.
You did okay. You did okay. Not your best weeks. You were off on the DC game where it was
Yes.
actually DC that was favored, not the Seattle Seawolves. But
Yeah.
I asked the people last week, right, Maddie? I said, is there a game that we can pull from this? Because we love our games here on the show, right? We love keeping score. But I don't think there's a game to be had here. It's just using your information and understanding where your mindset is on these lines. And then when the actual lines come out, it's like how confident are you in those picks? That's what I did this past week. Didn't help, but I think that's how I'm approaching it this week. So
Boom.
you were pretty solid. You got all of the lines in terms of outside that DC game on who the underdogs and the favorites were. Let's hear this week in terms of how well you can do here. We'll start off
Yeah.
with the New England Free Jacks San Diego Legion game.
And this is gospel, by the way. I don't know if people should know that this is gospel, but yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to think that the San Diego Legions are not going to be favored here.
Yeah.
Yes, Free Jack came off a really big win, but yeah, tough to not see the San Diego Legion favored here. I got to say they got to be favored by, I'm going to say 5.5.
All right, 5.5 favorites. San Diego were 6.5 favorites over the last week's team of the Chicago Hounds, which was interesting there. So we'll see if
Whoa,
if
6.5 favorites.
over Chicago.
Chicago Hounds.
Yeah.
God, I'm gonna move mine up. I'm moving it up to 6.5.
Okay, 6.5 for against the New England Free Jacks.
Yep.
Yeah, Maddie, that was a little bit bigger than what you had there. On to the next matchup. New England Free Jack, NOLA Gold, excuse me, and the Old Glory DC squad.
Well, just thinking about the thinking of how they put Old Glory DC as favorites against Seattle, they have to be favorites with that logic again against NOLA. They were what 7.5 favorites against Seattle, which means they're going to be similar, actually more. I think 8.5 favorites against this NOLA side.
Okay, 8.5 there. You got there. All right, next game you got Miami Sharks, Houston Sabercats. How big can this line be? The biggest that we saw, the biggest line that we saw in the running of the Anthem Rugby Carolina was 20.5 in round 3. Does this line get even close to that?
I don't think so. I think they'll be a bit more conservative with this one. Houston, of course, is going to be the favorite. I think they'll be favorited by I'm going to say 14.5.
What is your line there? At what point do you say it's not a good bet with Houston and
I would
Miami?
say like if it encroaches on 19, 20, I'm going to take Miami to cover.
Okay. But anything less than that, you're comfortable with Houston.
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with Houston with Houston covering that.
Okay. All right.
Actually, no, I'm gonna go up. I'm gonna go like if it's over like 21, then maybe Miami to cover. But honestly, I'm staying away from that one.
Okay. Really? No confidence.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm banging that home. If it's 14.5,
If it's 14.5, maybe, but like, I don't know. I don't think you'll get amazing odds on that one.
it's true. I mean, you'll get, half your
Get
money
the
back.
usual.
Honestly.
Yeah,
Get
yeah.
the usual. All right. RFCLA taking on the Utah Warriors.
I think this is the one. This is where, because they're so close in the standings, like this is where the interesting ones. I don't know. I'm trying to think who will be favorites. I have a feeling that RFCLA is going to be the favorites here against Utah, strictly because of their 4-game winning streak, and just how they looked in the last one. But I think it's going to be close. Like this one is going to be an RFCLA favorited by like 3.5 or something, or like 2.5 points. Yeah, that's what I think. I would say that if Utah are the favorites in this one, I would definitely take this all day.
Yeah.
If Utah ends up being the favorites, but yeah, even
I think LA is the favorites, no question. No question about it.
So I think it's going to be a close line, though. It's going to be a really close line.
Yeah. Lastly here, Chicago versus Anthem. You tell me, Maddie, what you think this is.
I mean, Chicago obviously favorites, but I think they go back up. It's going to be 19.5 favoriting Chicago.
Do we jump back on that bandwagon of Anthem having any chance of covering?
I can't see it. Like I have a really hard time seeing it with the way they've played recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if I saw a really close match with NOLA Gold last week, then I would have maybe said differently. But I just like 20 when I think about Chicago versus Anthem, 20.5 points doesn't seem like that much.
Yeah. No, but personally, I think it's a tough week for picks here.
It's a tough week. Like it's very favorite heavy. You're going to be taking a favorite unless the books surprise you.
Yeah.
And I would say the one to watch for me is Utah RCLA. Really check who they have as the favorites. I know we have RCLA as a favorites, but you never know what the books are going to do. And then check how big that line is. That spread is against Houston versus Miami. Like if it's anything under 10, if it's 10 or under, hammer Houston.
Yeah.
To cover that, because they will cover that spread.
To round it out, that's why I think this game is. I think we take these lines that you say. Obviously, these are your opinions in terms of how you think these games are going to go. When the actual lines come out, based on how far you are off of them, maybe it's a little bit confident building in terms of the side that you need to stray. And I think it tells a lot in terms of what direction you should go. All right. That is the TFR Betting Challenge presented by Betstamp. Betstamp Betting made easy. Again, check that link down below for some first-time new user deals at sportsbooks available in your area. Help support the show while also making some money while you're at it. All right, Maddie. Fun episode. Clean slate, right? Heading into this week.
Clean slate. New me and new Vandy whooping Fitzy's butt in the listener league. I had to get that in there because he said that we must. So new all of us, clean slate. We're coming for you. If you're watching, we're coming for you.
There you go. All right. For Matt Yee, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, I am Ryan Yee. We'll see you next week on another episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Oh.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.